Hey, what's up? Today I got a quick video on how to export your audio tracks from Pro Tools for mixing in another DAW. This is very common. Even if you're working with a mixing engineer that also uses Pro Tools, they're probably going to want your raw multi-track. So here's how to do that. First thing you want to do, go to tracks and then make sure you select to show only your audio tracks. That's all we're going to be exporting. Then you'll probably want to go to hide and hide your inactive tracks to hide the inactive tracks that you're not using. So now we've got just our audio tracks with our folders as well. If you have folders, make sure you open them so you can see the audio tracks. Before we get to the next step, if you haven't already named your track something that makes sense, like kick for kick drum, snare for snare drum, tom for toms, etc., bass for bass guitar for guitar, you want to do that. Make sure your guitar track doesn't say Bob or Joe because your mixing engineer doesn't know who Bob or Joe is or what instrument they played. So once our tracks all have names that make sense, we want to batch rename our tracks just to have a number in front of them. That way, when you export files, they will have the number in front of them, keeping them in the same order you had them in your DAW, which is, I'm assuming, a sensical order, like drums are together, bass is together, guitar tracks, etc. So to do that, we need to select just the audio tracks and not the folders, because that will put numbers in between them. If you use folders, this can be a bit of a time-consuming task, but you're going to want to hold Command and then select each track. Or what might be faster is click the first one, hold Shift, click the last one, and then unselect your folders. So now we have all of our audio tracks and not folders selected. We're going to batch rename them either by hitting Option Shift R or right-clicking on one of the selected tracks and selecting Batch Rename. We don't want to find, trim, or add anything. We just want to click Numbering. We're going to number at the beginning, and we'll start on number 1. It's a good number to start on. And for number of places, we just need 2 because here in this song, I have more than 10 tracks, but less than 100. So I don't need 3 number places. If you had 100 or more, you would need 3 number places. I don't need to separate with anything. And I don't want to use A to Z, just numbers. Hit OK. And voila, all of our audio tracks that we're exporting have a number in front of them, so they will show up in your file browser in the same order they were in your DAW. Just a heads up, if you haven't already, it's a good idea to make a save as of your Pro Tools file. So once you do this, if you mess anything up in the consolidation process or in the crossfading, you have a backup if you mess up, so you can go back and redo it. The next step is to consolidate all of these tracks to something we actually can export that will show up at the same start time for every DAW. It's a good idea before you do this to make sure everything you have is crossfaded properly. It's good to do that by hand, individual for every track, but for demonstration purposes, I'm going to do it all in one go. I'm going to hit Command F, and that will batch fade everything. For demonstration purposes, these settings are good enough. So everything's batch faded. And now we need to batch consolidate everything. So hit Enter to get your cursor at the start of the session, then hold Shift, and then click to the end of the session to get everything. And it looks like here should get everything. Yeah, it's good to have a little extra. Why not? That way you're not cutting off any of your audio tails or anything. So then once we have everything selected and it's crossfaded, we're going to go to Option Shift 3. So when you hit Shift Option 3, that basically consolidates your tracks. So they're all one nice audio chunk, all starting at the same point. You can load them up in any DAW and all the tracks will start up in time from the start of the DAW session. So our next step is to now export our newly consolidated files. You'll notice because we consolidated them, they now have the track number in front of them, which is great. So let's select everything we're going to consolidate. Just make sure all these files are selected. And then the command we want to hit is Shift Command K. You're going to want to export here in the same format you recorded in. So if you're unsure of your bit depth and sample rate, go to Setup, Session, and then you can see 24-bit 48K. So again, Shift Command K. Actually, we're going to do multiple mono. So over 24-bit and 48K. And back to this multiple mono. If you're doing everything in one go, it's a good idea to do multiple mono. So all of our mono tracks, which is most of our tracks, will come out mono. It's kind of an annoyance to have a mono kick drum mic that's just one mono track come out as a stereo track. But it's not as much of an annoyance, at least in my opinion, to have, say, your overheads, which are a stereo pair, have them come out as 2 monos, because I can drag those 2 mono tracks on to a stereo overhead track in my mixing template and they'll line up fine. What you could do is select all the mono tracks separately, export those then Shift Command K again, and then select all your stereo tracks and export those as interleaved. But that takes a lot of time. Multiple mono works for everything. Now let's choose a directory that makes sense. It's a good idea to make a separate folder for these. So here's my Pro Tools session folder. How about we make a new folder and we'll call it knock multi-track export. So there, we've got our own folder just for this export. Select that, click export, and assuming you choose the right sample rate and bit depth, this shouldn't take that long at all because it doesn't need to convert any files. And if we go to Finder and go to where we saved them, yeah, we have our multi-track export, and here's everything exported. It's got the proper track naming. And another reason why multiple mono is fine is, say for example, we have this snare room sample. It was a stereo track, and we can tell that because not only does it have the .l and .r extension at the end, it also is named 1313 for both tracks. So we know that that was one track. So now if you want, you could make subfolders within this folder and make like a drums folder, a bass folder, a guitar folder, vocals folder. But this is probably good if you have less than 50 tracks. You're just going to want to right click on the folder you exported in and then select compress your folder. That will create a nice little zip file that you can upload to Drive or Dropbox or FilePass or whatever your mixing engineer uses and send them an email. I hope that helped.